important to keep a clean house. And that could be a clean workspace. It could be your home. It could be decluttering your life. I was thinking about this yesterday because I went into a coin shop. It's a coin shop in town. It's been managed by the same man who owns it for, I believe, 60 years. He's an old man now, still has the coin shop. And if you walk in, the very first thing you're going to see is just more clutter than you'll have words to describe. And that's actually not really unusual for a coin shop. And I don't really mean disrespect to the owner. I think that overall he probably is perceived favorably in general. But the truth is that it's very hard to go into this coin shop and in any way think that you want to have a conversation about commodities which have monetary value, when it looks like the place hasn't been dusted for decades, and it doesn't look like paperwork has been filed for decades. There doesn't appear to be any system of organization or standards of any kind there. And yet this is catering to people who are trying to, in many cases, hedge against economic adversity by diversifying their portfolio into precious metals. In other contexts, I look at people who have dogs in my neighborhood. Dogs that run circles back and forth along the fence line, barking at me if I come by, destroying the yard they're in, digging holes, turning what could be a nice yard into a black pit of dog poop and dirt. And many times these are nice houses, but their yards are destroyed by a dog. And I think to myself, there really isn't anything you could do to make that house look more presentable other than to get rid of the dog and get rid of the damage that is being done on an ongoing basis. Or you look at people's houses and they've got all sorts of children's toys from the last 2 years, most of which are broken, random odds and ends, crooked fences, gardening implements, just willy-nilly laid out haphazardly everywhere. Or if I wanted to bring things in a little closer to home, I could say, what if I go on Amazon and I buy some new trinkets that I think are cool to put on my shelf, but then I throw my socks and underwear all over the floor, and my house is just a complete slop house, and I don't wash my dishes. So you walk into my apartment and what you see is last week's dinner still sitting in the sink, and the last 2 weeks of laundry laying on the floor. Well, does it really matter that I got some nice decorations to put on a shelf? Not really, because I'm missing the basic fundamentals of having standards for clean housekeeping. So whether it's my apartment, or it's the coin shop downtown, or it's the dog digging up the yard at the neighbor's house, all of this adds up to the importance of being a good steward of a few things in a meaningful way. And that's more important than having a lot of quantity. If you just did a few things and you did them well, and you made sure those were the things that were the most important to you, you'd probably win. It's been said in the workplace that multitasking is one of the greatest problems to productivity. It's not to say that you should be doing less. It's just you should be doing fewer things at a time. You should be doing one thing at a time, doing it well, and doing it completely. And if you did that, you probably would have plenty of time to do everything that you wanted to do. But quite often what we need to do is to divest ourselves of the things which don't actually add value into our lives. To me, I like to use as an example, if you ever went to a Ross Dress for Less store and you see all of the furniture decorations, or maybe at TJ Maxx or one of those places where you can get artwork and you can get furniture and you can get all sorts of different knickknacks and decorative odds and ends. And the truth of the matter is none of them really mean anything. None of them really have true value or quality. They're pretty. They're elegant to a point. They're cheap to a point. And you could fill a whole house up with these meaningless decorations. But other than looking nice, they're not really going to ever appreciate in value. You're never going to resell them for any sort of collectible value. They just are cheap, disposable decorations which are designed to make it possible for you to make it look like you have invested in quality, when in reality, it's just generic stuff. How much better would your life be if you bought less of that, had fewer things, but made sure all of those were things that tell a story, things that feel meaningful to you, things that inspire you, things that may appreciate and value, the kind of things that you might pass on from one person to another as the years pass. You see, we should focus on minimalism with meaning instead of continuing to get more stuff while we fail to be good stewards of the things that we have. Many times in professional environments, people struggle to succeed in their roles because they can't tell the difference between something which is not an important task and something else which is. There's lots of things you can ignore and they will sort themselves out. So don't spend a lot of time trying to solve things that don't even really need to be solved, only to get through your workday and realize that you still need to figure out how to tackle a few things which only you can solve. Do the things which really matter first, and do them completely, and do them right, do them with pride. And then add in those secondary tasks later, if you have time, as you have time. And you'll find you do have time to fit all of those things into your day. Sometimes we don't need to have more. We just need to have better priorities. Sort of like the pickle jar. If you put the big stones in and then the little stones around the big stones and then sand around that and then water into the sand, you can fit a lot of different things in the jar, but you can only fit them in the jar if you put them into the jar in the right order. first thing we need to do is make sure we don't have unnecessary, meaningless things in our lives that take up real estate, take up space, take up mental power, but don't really deliver anything of value. Get rid of the things you don't use. Get rid of the things that take up space and time and energy without actually delivering anything of tangible, meaningful value. Get rid of that stuff. Then take care of the things that remain and take care of them well. If you're going to have a shelf of things on display, then dust it. Don't let it look unkept. Take care of the things you have before you add more things to your collection. Good stewardship is much more important than quantity of things. And that's something I think a lot of people lose sight of, because it's a lot easier to say, well, let's solve our problems by spending more money on something. But maybe you don't need to spend more money on something. You just need to clean up your house. Maybe it's also true in terms of the pursuit of happiness. Because sometimes we think to ourselves, we would be happy if we had different circumstances, if we had more things, if we upgraded some aspect of our life. But sometimes it's not about having more things. It's about doing more meaningful things with the relationships we have, with the path that's already before us. Life is filled with opportunities to do good, but sometimes we get lost along the way because we're so busy trying to handle the minutia of battles we probably shouldn't even be fighting. But when you eliminate all the noise, it gets simpler. So learn how to clean up your house, clean up your yard, clean up your calendar, streamline your workflow. Sometimes it's better to go down to the Goodwill and get rid of a few things than it is to go to Amazon and buy a few more. Something to think about. I think minimalism is definitely something that's appealed to me more as time's gone on. And I also think, it's just kind of takes a weight off of your mind. Whenever you get rid of something, it's just one more thing you don't have to think about. Like I used to have these pet rats and I liked them. But then every weekend I had to make sure I cleaned up the rat cage. And it wasn't a big deal. Eventually the rats grew old and they died. And I was kind of sad to see them go. But then I also thought, it's one more thing that doesn't add clutter. It doesn't add an extra task. It doesn't add the extra dirt. It doesn't weigh down my day with one additional thing that I need to manage. And that's kind of nice. It's kind of nice to let your life become more simple. And then with what remains, you try to demonstrate good stewardship every day. And I think if you look at probably the way, the more wealthy people would decorate their homes, or maybe a sleek corporate headquarters would be decorated, typically minimalism is in vogue. You're more likely to see a few meaningful things strategically and thoughtfully placed than you are to see a whole lot of clutter. It's like the difference between going to a fine art museum and going to some sort of a you know, a museum like I saw in Polson, Montana. There's the Museum of America, I think it's called. Anyway, I went in there. It's this old, junky looking place. And if I was going to tell you what vibe it gives off, it feels like you walked into a junkyard. That's how it feels. You walk in, there's tons of cool stuff, historic weapons and all sorts of things that are relevant to American history. It's a place that has actually a lot of pretty interesting artifacts in there. But it's presented in such a trashy, uncurated way that it's really hard to go in and have any kind of a positive experience, because even if the stuff has value as artifacts, it's just cluttered and poorly presented. But if you go to a more established institution, you'll probably see things, not so much stuff put out, just it's going to be put out in a thoughtful way with a lot of opportunities for you to take in each individual exhibit and process it and have an interpretive experience. So I guess the point I'm getting at is that in life, many, many times, less is more. And it's better to get rid of most of the things in your life so that you can focus on making the most of a few things which remain than it is to keep on trying to find more things to add to your life in hopes that they will give you a sense of completion that you didn't have before. Maybe it's the same thing with my Steam library. It's so easy to add another game to the list, to the backlog of things one day I'll get to. But you know what the truth is? The truth is there's a very small handful of games that I really like that have an established community around them. Games which I will continue to play for hundreds or thousands of hours. And I don't really need all of the hundreds of games in my library because there's a few that are good. And if I just didn't worry about the rest, I would have a really good gaming career. So stop trying to be a person who knows how to dabble in everything and focus instead on having deeply meaningful experiences with a few things every day. As always, best of luck on your adventure. Till next time, thanks for watching.